Jam making doesn't require masses of fruit. Did you know that you can make small batch jam with however much fruit you have on hand? Let me show you how. I'll start by giving my strawberries a good wash. To a bowl of water, I'm going to add a few tablespoons of white vinegar. You could also use baking soda, but don't use both because they cancel each other out. Add your berries to the bowl and give them a good swish around. This will help to remove any dirt and debris from your berries. Once your strawberries are washed, remove the tops, being careful not to remove too much flesh. I'm using a knife, but you could use a straw or a strawberry huller, whatever your preferred method of removing the tops of the strawberry is. I'm going to use the strawberry tops in my compost, but if you wanted to, you could cook them down with equal parts sugar and water to make a strawberry syrup. We need to weigh the pot that we're going to be making our jam in. Make sure you take a note of that weight. I don't want large chunks of fruit in my jam, so I'm going to chop my strawberries quite finely. But if you're okay with bigger chunks of strawberry, go ahead and leave them whole or just dice them in quarters or halves. You may just need to let your jam cook a little bit longer in the cooking process. Once you've added all of your strawberries to your pot, you need to weigh it again. Now you'll want to subtract the weight of the pot that you wrote down earlier from this weight. That will give you your final weight of your fruit. The lemon is important in this recipe because it adds pectin, and that's what helps your jam thicken. So for every 100 grams of fruit, you're going to need half a tablespoon, 7.5 grams or milliliters of lemon juice. I've used 4.5 tablespoons, 60 milliliters in total. And if these ratios sound a little bit confusing, I've added them into the description below for a little bit more clarity. I like to pop the entire lemon in while I'm cooking it to just extract more of the juice and flavor. Make sure you've washed your lemon really well before doing this. And before adding my sugar, I'm going to add a few extra flavorings. In goes a few bay leaves and the beans from a vanilla pod. I'm just slicing the vanilla pod in half and popping the whole thing into the jam. We're using a 4:3 ratio, 4 parts fruit to 3 parts sugar. Now technically, this would be considered a preserve. The regulations state that to be jam, it needs to be 1 part sugar to 1 part fruit. But who needs all of that sugar when these berries are so sweet? So whatever the total amount of fruit you have in weight, divide that by 4 and then multiply it by 3. That will give you the amount of sugar you need in weight. This is always easiest to do when you're using weight measurements, but I will put the imperial measurements in the description below for this particular recipe in case that's what you're used to. I would recommend getting a scale though. Add the sugar to the pot, then give it a really good stir so that everything is mixed up together. You can cook the jam right now if you want to, but I find to make an even better jam, you'll want to let this sit overnight. So pop a lid on it and go to bed. It's the next day and you can see all of that sugar has worked so hard and it's pulled out loads of juice from the strawberries. It smells so fragrant and amazing. While the jam is heating up, let's sterilize our jars. Preheat your oven to 140 degrees Celsius or 275 degrees Fahrenheit. Wash your jars and lids in very hot soapy water. Then give them a good rinse, making sure there's no soap remaining on the jars or lids. Then pop them onto a baking tray with the sides that might be touching the fruit facing upwards. We want to try and keep that area as sterile as possible. These need to stay in your oven for 10 minutes, but don't take them out once the 10 minutes is up. Just turn off your oven and leave the door shut. It will keep your jam jars hot so that we have no thermal shock when we add the hot jam to the jar. Keep stirring your jam gently while it comes to a boil. When your jam starts to boil so much so that when you're stirring it, the bubbles don't go away, set your timer. Because my fruit was very juicy, I know it's going to need a little bit more time, but I always start the timer at the 7-minute mark and I work my way up from there. Once it's boiling, you want to be stirring constantly. We don't want any of that jam to burn to the bottom of the pot. To test for doneness, I'm going to spoon a little bit of the liquid onto a plate that's been in the refrigerator. If you run your finger through it and it doesn't come back together, it's a pretty good indicator your jam will set. Mine's still looking a little bit runny, so I'm going to let it go for another few minutes. In total, my jam took 12 minutes of boiling. Once you're happy with the consistency of your jam, turn off the heat and remove the flavorings, the lemon peels, the vanilla beans, and the bay leaves. Now's the time to remove your jars from the oven. Place them on a heat-proof surface and pour your hot jam directly into the jars. You want to leave a little bit of a gap at the top while you're pouring them in because the jam can bubble up from the heat. And you may want to wear oven mitts while doing this. The jam can splutter. I like to just tidy up the rims of my jars with a little bit of kitchen roll that has some white vinegar on it. This just helps to remove any little residual bits of jam and give you a perfect seal. Now these jars are particularly tricky to put the lids on when they're this hot, so I'm using some tongs and some careful maneuvering. But if you're using mason jars, just pop your lid on and screw it to finger tight. Once you've put the lids on every one of your jams, bring them together in the center of your tray and cover them with a kitchen towel. This will help trap in the heat to make sure they seal up perfectly. Once your jars have cooled completely, you can pop them into your cupboard for storage. They'll keep unopened for up to 6 months, or once you've opened them, make sure to store them in your fridge for 2 to 3 weeks. Once they're cooled, all that's left to do is enjoy them. I love fresh strawberry jam on a buttery croissant. To me, there's nothing better. These measurements for this recipe filled about 4 small weck jars. That's around 1 liter of jam, or around 5 cups. But don't really worry about that. The important thing is how much fruit you use and that you work with the ratios given to make as much or as little jam as you'd like. If you're looking for a delicious summer treat, why not try swapping the blackberries for my jam in my blackberry crumble bars? If you found this video helpful, please hit the like button down below and make sure to subscribe and hit the notification bell while you're there, because I come out with a new video every single week. See you next time.